What's up, everybody, and Happy New Year, and welcome to my top 10 games of 2012, where I'm going to take you through the 10 games that I enjoyed most last year. And a lot of these games on here you may disagree with. There may be some surprises on here on where they're ranked. In fact, there's probably a few games that you feel like deserve to be on this list, but keep in mind, these are the 10 games that I played and enjoyed the most. And I didn't play every game last year, so there may be some differences in opinion. So if you do have a different ranking system, be sure to leave your comments and, show me your top 10 games. I'm interested to see what you guys ranked at number 1, and hopefully you guys do enjoy my list. So let's get started. So number 10 on my list may come at a surprise, but it's Sleeping Dogs. And who doesn't love an inner city Hong Kong crime drama where you're an undercover agent trying to infiltrate some gangs? It's got the open world, it's got stealing, it's got sex, it's got drugs, you name it, it's got it. So basically it's Grand Theft Auto Asian Edition. And this game was actually dropped by Activision. For the longest time, all the news you saw out of it was that it was going to be an Activision game. Well, they dropped it, and Square Enix picked it up, and luckily for us, it paid off because it was one of my favorite games of 2012. Even though it didn't really revolutionize the whole open-world drama, the Grand Theft Auto type games, it still offered plenty of shenanigans that made it different from all the other ones, and it was really fun. The storyline was good enough that it kept me engaged throughout the entire game. At some point, some of the quests did get a little redundant, but there's a lot of things to do in this game. There's almost 30 hours of stuff you do. Assuming you went through and you leveled up everything, you got all the unlocks and you did all the side quests, there was plenty to keep you entertained, and I thought this game was a really good value. Now, the combat system in this game was so solid. It really reminded me of Arkham City, that kind of like kung fu style where each person waits their turn. A lot of counters, a lot of kicks, a lot of stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. So you can think Batman except you're Asian, without a cape, and you're also in Hong Kong, but you get the point. It's basically Arkham City. So if you're a fan of those type of games, I'm sure you will love Sleeping Dogs because it's a nice blend of those games with the open worldness of like a Grand Theft Auto game. So I definitely feel like this had a lot of mindless fun out there, and it was a nice change of pace from your typical game, and I think it really deserved a spot in my top 10. So let's face it, Mass Effect 3 had a ton of drama surrounding it. People were unsatisfied with BioWare's ending to the point that they forced them to release a bonus DLC which was basically designed to give the player more closure on that front. With all that aside though, Mass Effect 3 was still one of my favorite games of the year. It really capitalized on a lot of the successes of the previous two games and gave you the ultimate space soap opera experience. It combined all the successes of Mass Effect 1 and 2 into kind of this total package. Now, the new subtle changes they made improved a lot of things from AI to the combat mechanics, as well as a sleeker menus, which in my opinion made it much easier to navigate through your different abilities. Even though the ending definitely left you kind of scratching your head, I felt like the portions leading up to it were very solid and definitely well written. It really gave you closure on a lot of fronts. I just wish a lot of the choices you made in the first two games had more effect on the overall outcome of the game versus just 3 generic endings. And I know a lot of people felt the same way, and that's why they released the DLC. But even though they did disappoint in that, I could say the storyline was still pretty solid as a general rule, even after the sour taste that was left in my mouth from the ending. It was also the first game in the series to introduce multiplayer though, and they did a pretty solid job on that front. It offered a nice way to play with others without destroying the Mass Effect experience, and I think that was really important, because I was really skeptical of multiplayer when I heard about it. The BioWare guys were like, hey, we had multiplayer in mind from the start, we just didn't really know how to implement it. So, it offered a nice blend of the normal storyline, that Mass Effect feel, without really destroying what you know and love about Mass Effect. They also provided it with plenty of support and DLC post-launch, so if you really enjoyed the multiplayer, there was plenty to do there. But even though it wasn't as good as Mass Effect 2, I still think I have to give the third installment of Mass Effect number 9 on my list of my top 10 games of 2012. So 2012 was definitely the year of the zombies. Walking Dead hit its ultimate popularity, and DAYZ became one of the most popular mods in the last couple years. And even though hackers kind of ruined the momentum this game had, it was still a blast. It offered a nice blend of the isolation feeling with a lot of heart-pounding moments. There's never been more stressful moments I've had in video gaming than some of the times I've had in DayZ. You work so hard to get a lot of the gear, you work so hard to get certain positions, and then, in a split second, that can all be gone when a bandit shoots you in the head. Now, Even though, like I said, hackers kind of ruined this game for me, it was one of the most enjoyable games I played in 2012. And it definitely does offer you a nice social aspect too. I mean, you can meet up with friends and have a lot of fun with that. So even though it does focus a lot on isolation and, being the only survivor, it does offer you the potential to meet up with a lot of friends and have a lot of fun. And I think that really gave you a lot of variety in the way you played the game. I mean, you could gang up and ride around in the bus. I mean, there's so many fun ways to play DayZ. So if you could look past a lot of the bugs, since it was basically an ongoing beta, you could have a blast with DayZ. So that's why I gave it number 8 on my top 10 games of 2012, and I really look forward to the full release later in 2013. So PlanetSide 2 comes in at number 7 on our list, and it was one of the most ambitious games that I can think of in the last couple of years. It is one of the largest first-person shooters you could ever imagine, so think Battlefield times like 100, because you could have, ultimately you can have thousands of people on a server at any given time. And it's definitely deserving of this spot on this list. Now, there is a huge learning curve on this particular game, which is off-putting to a lot of people. I know a lot of people struggle to get involved in the game to feel like they're actually making a difference, but there's so much you can do in this game. There's so many people that you can meet, play with, and there's a really, really active community that I feel is out there to help you learn. So I've really enjoyed my time on PlanetSide 2, but there are a lot of things that I think they still need to fix within this game. But I think once this game gets finished, completely evolved, I think that it'll be one of the best first-person shooters on the market. Now, it is a free-to-play, and this is going to be one of 2 free-to-plays on my list, and as a rule, I don't like free-to-plays, but I think PlanetSide 2, it's not really about a cash grab. There's a lot of things that you can spend money on if you want to, but it's there if you want to maybe go out of your way and just kind of level up and not really worry about spending money on the game. Now, it is a very massive game though, so you do have to rely a lot on the social aspect, which I think may put a lot of people off. Maybe if you play by yourself, if you're not a huge fan of playing with other people, you don't know anybody that plays the game, that can be really, really frustrating. But it definitely was one of the most jaw-dropping games I played in 2012, and it ranks at number 7 on my list of top games. Now, you guys know that I am not a huge fan of the free-to-play model. I'd much rather pay my $60 for a game than go out there and get nickeled and dimed in order to play and enjoy a game. But Blacklight Retribution was one of the few free-to-play games where I actually had a blast. Now, you guys know that I played in the alpha, the beta, and all that stuff. I played it at PAX about 2 years ago, so I've really watched this game evolve. And it finally hit its full release here in 2012, and it was in full swing. They made a lot of changes. They integrated a lot of the feedback they got from the community, and I really think they've made one of the best free-to-play shooters that I've ever even touched. And there's a lot of customization. There's a lot of different gun mechanics. It's a very skill-based game. And that's really a testament to just how solid this game is. It's really kind of difficult to kind of pick up and play, but it's not so much reliant on spending a lot of money to get the good attachments. Now, if you spend a lot of money, can you get some of the good weapons a little bit faster? Yes, that is definitely true. But, if you put your time into the game, if you learn how to play the game, Blacklight Retribution offers one of the best, if not the best, first-person shooter free-to-plays on the market. So it definitely was one of my favorite games this year, and it gave me hope that developers could actually use the free-to-play model to make solid titles. Battlefield free-to-play is one of the games that comes to mind as just a really poor example of a free-to-play model because you have to invest so much money into it. Whereas Blacklight Retribution, they did all the things right. They made it so that if you wanted to buy things earlier, if you wanted to have the customization, you had to spend a little bit of money, but it wasn't the end of the world if you just wanted to sit down and play this game, that you wanted to go through the ranks and rank up. So it's definitely still in full swing, so if you didn't get a chance to play it, go over there and check it out because it's free to play. And it was one of my favorite games in 2012, and that's why I've got it number 6 on my list. Alright, I know. Leave it to the Battlefield guy to rank a game that came out in 2011 on his top games of 2012. But Battlefield 3 really changed a lot in 2012, and I think it was the height of the game throughout this entire year. I mean, with the premium offering, they gave us so many different DLCs that really made it one of the most, long-lasting first-person shooters in a long time, especially in this new age where games only last about a year. After about 9 months, they tend to move on to the next game, and you don't really see that game that lasts a really long time. But Battlefield 3 did. They supported the game for the last 2 years, and I think 2012 was a really important year in the Battlefield 3 world because, we got 3 DLCs, and even though there were a lot of problems with this game in the year of 2012,
the cigar's getting pushed up, but it's not even fucking shooting people.
And a lot of things like the use as frag rounds we'll never forget, and the dark glitch and the like, but they did offer us 3 really unique DLCs throughout the course of the year, which I think really kind of set the standard for first-person shooters. I mean, you got Close Quarters, which you saw me playing at the beginning of this particular clip, then you've got Armored Kill, which focused more on open world stuff, big maps with a lot of vehicles. But then you got the Aftermath, which was kind of a blend of both worlds. There was a lot of urban fighting, but they also offered you some new vehicles, a lot of new environments. So I think Battlefield 3 definitely had a really good year in 2012, and that's why I ranked it number 5 on my top 10 games of 2012. So number 5 on my list is Assassin's Creed 3, and how many of you guys weren't just completely in awe when you first saw this trailer at E3 in 2012? It looked like one of the most amazing games I had ever seen. I was like, wow, they're really upping the ante with this game. And if you could get past the extremely slow start of Assassin's Creed 3, it offered you one of the best single player experiences of the year. Especially after 2 years of what I consider filler Assassin's Creed, this really got back to the roots of the game, back to that main storyline, which in my opinion was a lot more exciting than the Ezio storyline that we had been following for the past 2 years. So this game had been in development for quite a while, and they were really ambitious in the environments, and they really just kind of changed up exactly how Assassin's Creed play. You're used to those big cities, Italy, Istanbul, a lot of the big city elements, whereas with this there's a lot of woodland areas. You're in the city of Boston, which made it so much more different than what you were accustomed to. And they definitely improved on the gameplay mechanics of the actual combat system, which made it a lot more rewarding. I was a little worried about the addition to guns to the Assassin's Creed lineage. I know that in Assassin's Creed 2 they did have a very rough rendition of a gun, but muskets were in full force during this period. But luckily it was executed well, and it definitely deserves number 4 on my list of top games of 2012. So clocking in at number 3 on my list is Far Cry 3, and this is one of the most interesting games I played, and in one of the few complete packages of a first-person shooter that I've seen in a while. I mean, you got a really solid campaign with a pretty decent multiplayer, and you also had a really cool co-op edition. So there was a lot of things that you could really toy around with in Far Cry 3, and the open world feel of the campaign allowed you to play it in any style you wanted. If you wanted to play stealthy, you could play stealthy. If you wanted to play run and gun, you could run and gun. If you wanted to be a big game hunter with a bow and arrow and hunt animals such as tigers, bears, sharks, manta rays, you name it, if it's in the game you can kill it, and that was a lot of fun. So I did really enjoy the campaign aspect of this game, but the multiplayer was surprisingly solid. Now, it's not the best multiplayer I ever played, but being a game that focuses more on the storytelling, on the campaign side of things, it was really nice to have a first-person shooter that offered you both a good multiplayer and a good campaign, something that I think a lot of games like Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, and Battlefield are guilty of, is just focusing on the multiplayer, not really worrying a ton about the single player aspect. Whereas with Far Cry 3, you got a little bit of everything. If you wanted to play the single player, it was there. If you wanted to do the single player, then go into the multiplayer and have a really good experience, that was there as well. And one of the coolest things about Far Cry 3 was the map editor. And this is something I haven't seen executed well in a game outside of Halo in a really long time. So it was really nice that they took the time to include something like this. As you see me playing on a Far Cry 3 reimagination of Wake Island from the Battlefield series. So there was a lot of options at your disposal, and there was a lot of cool things about Far Cry 3, which definitely made it a tough choice for the top 3. I was really debating on which 3 games I wanted to put within my top 3, and I definitely think Far Cry 3 deserves number 3 on that list. So 2012 marked the return of Master Chief in the Halo series with 343 behind the helm instead of Bungie, and they did a pretty awesome job with the multiplayer. It was one of the best multiplayers I played this year, and I had a really difficult time not putting this as my number 1 game, but the one hesitation I had to it was the weak campaign. Now, the overall story of the campaign was pretty awesome. I enjoyed the campaign as a whole, but a lot of the times it felt really linear, and I mean, that's to be expected from a first-person shooter, let alone Halo, which has always had pretty linear campaigns aside from the first Halo. But for the most part, a lot of the quick time actions really took you out of the out of the fight, and I felt like I was not really engaged as much as I was before I did the quick time action, and I am not a huge fan of that. So the campaign was a little underwhelming in that respect, but overall the package you got with Halo was awesome. You know, the multiplayer was some of the best Halo multiplayer I had played in a long time, and it doesn't feel like Halo 3. You know, it feels like its own game. You know, I wasn't a huge fan of Reach, but I think they made enough changes without changing the formula completely to make Halo 4 feel super fresh. I was a huge fan of the ordnance drops. When you earn them, you know, it's a nice way to integrate some rewards for doing really well. And I still think that Halo stands as one of the most awesome social games out there, especially with the way that you can play with friends, and it's very teamwork oriented, which I think a lot of shooters tend to get away from these days, and I'm glad to see that Halo stuck to its roots. So I definitely had so much fun playing this game in 2012. I really need to get back into playing it, but with all these awesome games, it's tough to really compete for my time, but luckily Halo did get a very large portion of my time, and it definitely deserves the number 2 spot on my list of top games of 2012. So before we get to my number 1 game of 2012, let's look at my biggest letdown of the year, and it comes at no surprise that it's Medal of Honor Warfighter. This was a game that I was so excited for. I felt like it had a lot of potential to kind of bridge the gap between the Call of Duty and Battlefield community. It would offer a different type of gameplay, but what we got was a really jumbled mess with a lot of bugs, and EA has actually pulled all support on this game. So you know, they did improve it a little bit with the latest patch, but for the most part, this game was just completely broken from release all the way up until like December 15th. So you basically got a broken game from the start, which was obviously rushed out and unfinished, and I think that it left a lot of people disappointed in the way EA kind of pushed it out for the most part. And it was really a shame because Danger Close had a lot of good ideas. You know, the concept was there, the execution was not. It had a lot of sloppy menus, you know, a lot of bugs that just didn't really make it feel like it was a finished game. Granted that a lot of the attachments within the games had absolutely no effect on your weapon. They were purely cosmetic. So there wasn't a lot of variety to be had in this game, and I think that's one of the reasons why at this point it's already basically a dead game. The community has given up on it, which is a shame because I think that this game had a lot of potential, but it definitely was my biggest disappointment of the year of 2012. So number 1 on my list is probably not that surprising, but Borderlands 2, yeah! The game that I probably invested the most time in as far as a single player game this year. Now I was a huge fan of Borderlands 1, and Borderlands 2 really capitalized on the success of the first game and was really engaging. It was probably one of the games that I invested the most time into from the single player side of things. And a lot of people criticized this game saying that it was just a reskin of its predecessor, which, you know, for the most part, that's probably true, but if you were a fan of Borderlands, it offered you what you wanted out of a sequel, which is more loot, more weapons, new storyline, and a lot of new places to explore, and I really enjoyed that. You know, I played through the campaign on 3 different characters multiple times, and it was a blast. I can say that my time spent with Borderlands 2 was time well spent because it was a lot of fun. Now, I know a lot of reviewers out there really did rip this game for the fact that it didn't really change a whole lot, but to me, I didn't think that that was a huge problem. You know, it updated the graphics. It made it look a lot smoother, in my opinion. You know, they gave us new weapons. They gave us new loot. There were so many cool things that you got from loot. You know, I really enjoyed the code system that they integrated. If you ever followed the developers on Twitter, sometimes they would tweet out shift codes, which I thought were a lot of fun because it would get you some really cool weapons that you might not normally have. And that kept the game going. You know, the DLCs for this game, really solid. So if you were a Borderlands 1 fan and you passed on Borderlands 2 because you were worried about it just being, quote, a reskin, don't, guys. This game was fun. I can't criticize this game. I mean, if I sat down and tried to think about, you know, what did I not like about Borderlands 2, and I just really couldn't think about it because it was just pure fun. It's one of the few games out there that you can play, and you can play as serious or as carefree as you want, and that's what I love about this game, you know, the loot and stuff like that. So it definitely deserves to be my top game of 2012. I had so much fun with it. Let me know what you guys think, though. What was your top game of 2012? And hopefully you did enjoy this countdown because I spent a lot of time putting it together, and it was really difficult to narrow this down to 10 games, but I think the 10 games that I picked were very solid. So if you missed my other videos, check them out, and be sure to leave a rating on this video if you did enjoy it. Peace.